Hi, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Guest Safety Officer Lobby Group. A few of you are going to find out what I have to put up with in a few seconds when I introduce Gary. Yeah, I know he's still here, but now he's decided he's a comedian. But I'll let him do his little gag. And perhaps some of you will write in and tell him that he's got to go. I can't get rid of him yet. It's contractual, but you understand. But we have some fantastic people here today. An old friend of the show, Mr. Trevel Henry, is there. And, of course, making his first appearance. It's Jim ODwyer, hero of One Man Doors fame, who really wrote a fantastic article. But it's time for everyone else to have a quick introduction and tell us who you are, what you do. So I'll begin with Gary so we can get to the interesting people as soon as possible. Gary.
Well, Ian, as you know, so may the fourth be with you. I know you wanted to throw that in, but there you go. May the fourth be with you, Ian.
See what I mean?
Anyway, I'm Gary Twining-Wright. I've been in the security industry for 37 years. I've done everything from close protection, training, door supervisors, event organizer, response teams. I've worked in the NHS as a response team, and I've never done cyber security. There you go.
All right, Trevel.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Ian. Just a little bit about me and my kind of backstory, as they say. I was born up north. I left school at 14. I wasn't in trouble leaving school at 14. I wanted to be a budding footballer and failed miserably. There's a story everybody's familiar with. But I went into the services, had a very good time in the services. In context, it's not everybody's cup of tea. But when I left the services, I went and joined the policing, Kent Police, as it turns out, for those of you who already know me. And I worked there for a good number of years, again, where I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Whilst there, I got involved in the world of expert witness reporting. I'd like to say it was a smooth transition with lots of learning steps and skills attainment. But from the smiles on people's faces on screen, it was kind of like, here's a report, get on with it, within itself from there. But on coming back to a serious note and just kind of closing my backstory, so to speak, I left Kent Police December 2015. I was fortunate in January of this year, I've been working in between time, but to take over as co-director at NFPS, National Federation for Personal Safety, along with my co-director colleague, Robert Landels, where, and something you said a moment ago, Ian, everything we want to do along with yourselves and many others, the language might be different, but we want to improve safety, enhance the service people deliver by empowering people. Yeah, and it might sound like a cliche, but you know me well enough. That's what I believe in. So that's my little bit of a backstory. Thank you.
Jim?
Well, I guess my history starts with Metropolitan Police. Joined in 1981, served there till 1997. Came out, had been learning a martial art called Aikido, and the teacher was showing me stuff that was kind of a lot better than the police systems of holding and controlling people. And I left the police and started Aegis, and we were the first company to get an official accreditation from an awarding body for a physical skills program for the private security industry. And I thought I was going to be a millionaire. It was going to be easy, you know. The law required it. I had all the answers there. But bottom line is the security industry wasn't really ready to accept their legal responsibilities, and the health and safety executive were kind of under-resourced to enforce the legislation that had come in 1974. And researching reasons why the legislation wasn't being enforced, I gradually got to be, fully aware of what the health and safety legislation was about. I also learned much more about common law than I'd ever thought was necessary as a part of it. But I started the violenceatwork.co.uk website, started challenging people, and I say gradually continued with Aegis, providing services to NHS trusts on meeting the conflict resolution and physical intervention, so on, trainings. And I suppose for the last 10 years or so now, I've been acting as an expert witness in violence at work matters and restraint matters. So that's me.
I think you were one of the founders of the ICM, weren't you? The Institute of Conflict Management.
Yes, I've got a certificate in. Yes,
Yeah.
from way back. Yeah, but I guess the ICM wasn't going in the direction I really wanted it to at the time. I thought they were going to be about establishing one national training system, and no one's actually been able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, it's on the cards that the argument has to be made, and I'm ready for it. I'm just, there's no funding that's available apparently for researching what would be the optimum say skill range or skills range. But it's an argument I'm looking forward to, because I know I've got the answers.
Oh well, this is what we want. We want solutions, and that's what we are here at Guest Safety Officer Lobby Group. We are solution driven, because anyone can pick the system apart. I don't need any help to do that. Certainly don't need Gary. Yeah? But what we can do is together, all of us, hopefully we can put forward solutions. So that's part of what we're on about today. So Gary and I discussed one-man doors the other week, and as a result of that, Jim wrote a brilliant article. And yeah, Jim, if you could just sort of give us a bit more of your thinking about that article, and I'll make sure that's on the website. Well, not on the website, on the links to this podcast afterwards.
Well, I guess I just looked at the research, so looked at all the information that was available about it, and just went through it systematically and came up with a conclusion that it will never be safe to deploy just one supervisor at a licensed premises, because effectively they're just sitting ducks waiting for the time to come around where they're going to be outgunned. And I can't imagine a risk assessment that would of a door supervisor role which would authorize just one to be deployed on their own, because there's so many things that they need to be able to do. And having just them on their own is just not enough, and that's what's proved to be the case.
Is that backed up by law though, Jim? You know, the health and safety law that you researched, as far as you can tell?
Well, the health and safety legislation is pretty clear, but it's not very explicit, and that's the problem. It comes down to risk assessment. Risk assessment is the fundamental problem. It's subjective. Trevel could have a different opinion to me, to you, to Gary, and there's nothing that is able to hone it down to say, apart from cases stated, as it were, to say what would be definitively what would be right and what would be wrong. But actually, it's the quality of the risk assessment, because risk assessment process should itemize the precautionary measures that you put in place, and then it should review the effectiveness of those, or the efficacy of those precautionary measures after every incident. But then that should refine the precautionary measures, improve them and develop them, improve them, and that's a process which is just absent. I know that the health and safety executive put up a an example risk assessment for a licensed premises, and it's just a farce. It's just, okay, these are our first impressions, but after Friday night, are we going to change that? I don't know. And it's the system of that. No one's really checking the health and safety. There's no regulatory check of what's going on. It would just be like Trevel will get service and papers, or I get service and papers, and you say, what do you think of that? And you think, well, it's rubbish, isn't it? Because it's unworkable, it's impractical, it doesn't work, and so on. And by that time, you're halfway towards court, and inevitably the cases are settled out of court, because the circumstances are so clear, once they come to light. It's just,
Gary, what Gary, I was just going to say, before I go to Trevel, from an operational point of view, you're out on the ground, you know, regularly. Is risk assessment in this situation a real issue?
Well, I can take it at the time, because we've actually had this happen a few years back with one of our officers was assaulted at work. He actually had his neck broken. When the insurance company looked at it, they asked for the assignment instructions, the risk assessments, the training, and everything which we provided. And because we've put in our risk assessment and the assignment instructions, if it's a one-man door and you cannot remove that person, you have to call 999 because it's unsafe for you to do so. And obviously, the officer signed that off because he agreed with it. And lo and behold, we had an incident. He got injured, but he didn't call 999, so it fell back on him. So, you know, on that point of view, the insurance went, well, it's not the company's problem. The what's it called? The licensing or the venue, they turned around and said it's not their problem because they followed the guidance by the SIA, one per 100, and there was less than that in the venue. And obviously, no one's going to blame the SIA because the SIA, wherever they got their guidance from, I believe it from I think they got their guidance, I've been informed, from the old Purple Guide.
That's right.
So we get a situation. So we've got a situation where somebody's been, you know, potentially catastrophically injured, and as a result of everybody else having ticked to their boxes, you know, the guy's basically left on his own. So Trevel, what's, you know, just again, not necessarily referring to the case that Gary's just mentioned, but picking up as well on what Jim has said. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think echoing some of what you said, but I'd just like to come in first. I think certainly from my experience this year is pre-COVID, if you wish, a lot of certainly trainers, training providers, awarding organizations, and other established people, if I can say, in the hierarchy, were being called to court. So, you know, there was a slight change going on, albeit very slight. So rather than the poor end operator, he or she being left alone, and as you say, all the boxes allegedly being ticked against them, you know, so they were in a quandary anyway, wasn't it? You know, from that perspective there. So that was changing. I say was, because since COVID, I haven't noticed any continuous of that, you know, from abroad. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. But I think certainly, you know, yeah, one of the things certainly, you know, as Jim quite rightly points out, you know, we get served with papers, we get a set of instructions to look at issues and incidents. And I think, you know, one of the key aspects I think people need to be aware of, those set of instructions are relatively clear to us, you know, and people who aren't informed may think, well, there's all these other factors going on. And whilst they are contributory factors, depending what the instructions are, then that's our kind of, say, our key focus of attention. You know, and that can be quite wide within itself. But then coming back to the fact that things have been, you know, processes, protocols have been signed off in the first instance, and say answering it slightly aside from the point you've just raised, but I think the subjectiveness, what, you know, Jim quite rightly touched on, I think, you know, that's paramount in a lot of this. But what was an individual's rationale for doing X, Y, Z itself, which is pertinent. And, you know, I'm going to come back to the same age-old argument about evidence to support their particular actions. You know, and I know I'm looking at this a little bit bottom up, but I generally believe people would be staggered. You know, we say this, we say it a lot, but I think people would be staggered at the lack of evidence that's presented to support individual actions. Yeah, which makes it a mountain for them to climb. Yeah, and I don't want to just use a cliche, it wasn't written down, it didn't happen, because we know that's not strictly true. But, you know, there's certain reports, certain incidents, certain reviews, we can, certain reports, we can read them. We could probably fill the gaps in of what we think has happened, you know, with respect. But the point is, you know, there was no tangible reference to, if you wish, give a rationale as to why people took out certain actions, you know. And whilst we, you know, I say we, I don't mean just we as in Jim and I mean You know, anybody who delivers training would respect, they're asked for their expertise, aren't they? You know, so if we're consulting, people want our opinion on things, you know. But I think, you know, whilst we may well get into debates, and as sometimes happens in court, around assumed facts in themselves, you know, which can be grey. But I think significantly, yeah, we could debate somebody shouldn't be on a door on their own. You know, people do it. We sometimes respect why they do it. I'm not saying we agree with it, but we respect why they may have to do it, you know, for financial reasons, etc. Whilst things have been signed off. But I think it's a lack of support for the poor end operator when he or she is on their own with no advice, no guidance whatsoever. And forgive me, don't want to sound like I'm preaching, but what I mean by this, they're in an environment, in a world which is totally alien to anything they've ever experienced before. You know, I call it, we're in somebody else's backyard playing by a different set of rules which people aren't familiar with. You know, and that's one of the factors. So forgive me, that was a very wide answer to your question, Ian. You know, I don't quite apologize for it, but you know, but Jim's smiling there because I think, you know, and yourselves, but you know what I'm talking. When they round up in that process, it is completely alien to anything they know, and they've got limited reference to support their actions.
Jim?
Well, I agree. I mean, report writing is something that, you know, should be, it's not really something they do, is it? You know, they don't get it.
Well, they do.
They don't even keep a notebook. You know,
can I because I'm sorry, Jim, I just will, because I think it's important. I do know the SIA go to, you know, they put this into the training. I'm not saying, and it's done. So this, it is trained, but it's how it's trained and what's being trained and how it's occurring. Because I have anecdotal evidence, because all of my evidence appears most these days because I'm no longer is anecdotal, but essentially they're given scripts. They're taught how to write a report. The training is conducted, but in some cases they're given scripts to copy, essentially, you know, change this, put my name's that, do so and so. But I don't know, maybe it's there. Gary, have you had any knowledge of this?
Yes, I mean, as I was training for a large organisation last year, they didn't really go much into deep about the pocket notebooks, but they did have a statement writing course which was scripted, and everyone had to do 500 words minimum on a video which they supplied, or you supplied, whoever it was. But it was completely scripted. But the point is, once they leave, they forget this stuff. I can go. I guarantee I'll go to virtually any place now. They won't be carrying a notebook. They won't know how to write a statement, and they certainly won't know how to fill out a notebook. And that's one of the biggest issues out there now. I mean, I see it every week within, you know, my wife's company. Every week we're handing out notebooks. Well, where's yours? Oh, I've forgotten about it. I didn't have one. I've never had one. How'd you use it? Take it from there.
Jim, going back to you, sorry, so I just had to bring in that in because if we're going to, this is such an important subject that we need to be very, very clear on what is and isn't happening, whether or not it meets the standards that we would require is a different thing.
well, it's like, for example, you say, okay, we do a risk assessment. We say, you know, we've got this guidance that says 1 to 100. We've got a premises license that requires 1 to 100. We've got other guidance as well. But when we do the risk assessment, we would look down and what's the guy supposed to do? What does this person have to do? What's their role? And when it comes down to it, okay, we're dealing with potentially people who are, you know, in a stupor, alcoholically or intoxicated was the word I was searching for, drink or drugs. And where they're disinhibited about their behaviour, they do not respect authority. And it may be the first time they've ever been to this place that's never, ever had any trouble before. But for licensing purposes, they have to have a door supervisor who can't hide. They're there with their badge, with high vis on and all the rest of it. And they're expected to get involved if this person causes trouble. And I think if you to do the risk assessment, say, well, what comes next? Potentially is trouble or physical action, and then is it safe to have one person? No. Or what steps are we going to have to take then to make this a safe system of working? And that's what's unsafe, is the system of working. I mean, I've spoken to guys who, I won't say where it is, but they've got 3 or 4 clubs in really close proximity, and they're quite well staffed. And if there's trouble at one club, they'll all dash across the road and help out. And it's quick, you know, it's within 2 minutes really. Of they can have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 geezers there, or door supervisors there within a couple of minutes. But is that enough to prevent it starting in the first place? No. Is it affecting, is being on your own affecting the door supervisor's attitude, knowing that he's at risk, knowing that, I keep saying he, but I appreciate there's some lady door supervisors too. But I mean, knowing that you're on your own. I mean, I know when I was a cop, if I was on my own, I would do half the work that I would do if we were 2 paired up. You know, it's just one of those things, isn't it? Because if your mate says, you know, if you've got 2 of you, you feel 10 times stronger than when you're on your own.
About being part of a team. Yes, Gary.
I was going to say, well, this goes back, which we spoke to not long about. It's better about going back to the old days when you had the single bouncer who could handle himself, or they themselves. They could handle themselves. But those times have changed now, and you know, we're governed by guidance lines. The fact we could lose our license, so all these things come into play. So if you're there by yourself and it's going wrong, what are you meant to do? Where is your backup coming? You might not have a company across the road. You might,
you should have a safe place to retreat to.
Yeah.
In theory, yes, but
Well, you should.
yeah, in theory, but how can you retreat? You're meant to be a security officer or a guest safety officer. There's no place for you to retreat to.
That's why I say you're a sitting duck.
You are a sitting duck. I mean, as I say, I mean, the gentleman who worked for us, I mean, he's injured now. I mean, you've only got to look at the videos which I put on this morning, you know, and the way we're spoken to and dealt with, and they're all by intoxicated people. And the last one was me in that video where I just spoke to the gentleman and said, what are you doing down here? And how quickly he turned on me. And that was completely, you know, I was just saying, you okay? You down there? And boom.
Oof,
That's, I mean, I cut the video at that point because, I mean, I had to move away. I moved out of that. But he was actually led out by 4 or 5 people in the end. He didn't kick off, but it escalated very rapidly from that point.
It's too quick. When it happens, it's quick.
Yeah. And you've got to realise that any of these altercations, if it's a fight or anything like that, the maximum they last for is about 10 seconds, 15 seconds max, because before it's broken up, all things have happened. So you've got that 10-second melee. But what's that single person meant to do? That 10 seconds can lead you, you know, again, I use my own example here. I was in a melee the other week where I got a flipping TBI. A guy sniped me and put me in hospital. So, you know, it's seconds this happens. And throughout the years, you know, security officers, door supervisors, guest safety officers, you know, I know guys have died on the job by being hit, you know, and DSO is always talking about we're looking after the general public, what have you, but who's looking after the single person on that door? And as we keep saying, single doors are not safe. You know, they just are not safe.
I know something that Trevel will know. We get asked, you know, is this in line with industry standards? I mean,
Yeah,
they just need to be told. The industry standards are consistently well below the, you know, the health and safety requirements.
I think I'd like to just again, just to think. So it's just to say, because that bit that you've just said, industry standards really got me, because you're right. The standards that are being put forward are academic. They're academic standards, and they are not practical standards. They are fine that you can sit there, and Jim, when you said, oh, well, wait, what happens? It's great on a Monday, but what happens when we get to Friday? You know, everything changes. And the other part of that is if something, these are emotional reactions when these things kick off. And those emotional reactions can take place at any time. It doesn't, you know, it can be and it could be in a venue that opens up at 11 o'clock in the morning, yeah, or it can happen at 3 in the afternoon. It doesn't all just happen at night time. So if it's okay for these altercations to take place between during the daylight, what changes? What makes the difference then? Trevel, from a for a thing, it should, if it's not fit for purpose on one day at one hour of the day, it shouldn't surely be fit on any of them. I don't know.
No, not at all. And I mean, certainly, and I mean, yeah, the link to what you've just said there and what Jim kind of introduced to what you said there, I think certainly training, it should be looked at from two broad-headed perspectives, and we can drill down into when I say these. But one, is, let's say, a new starter for ease of reference, yeah? So his or her training should be its initial induction training, isn't it? Basic training. And I use the word, I'm just generalizing when I use the word basic training, yeah? It will, it will give them that level of competence along with other skills attainments that they're now a competent worker in that environment. Beyond that, the training should be advanced. And when I say advanced, not to be grandiose, if they've had the basic training, we're now getting into, and Jim's point, I'm smiling internally, industry standard. The point is, if we've got a skill set, the knowledge, experience, expertise to be able to meet somebody's needs, and that person comes to you and this is the reality of the environment we're working in, whatever that reality is, with some evidence behind it, then training providers should be able to meet that need. And some of it's going to get into the contentious area of high-risk techniques, which need to be looked at in a lot more detail. Yeah. Not only a Jim smile. Sorry, you're all smiling.
Same one for another time, but I mean, we all here know that the quickest, fastest way to disable somebody is a sleeper hold.
Yeah.
Judo practitioners have shown us how, when it's properly trained and rehearsed, I think there's been only a couple of deaths as a result of it. And one of those was a judo instructor who'd forgotten to tell his student how he was going to signal submission. That did amuse me. But, the guys are out there using it. We know that.
But I think,
you might
sorry.
think, well, if you were trained to do that and then to respond to what you find after that, then, what would be the problem with teaching it?
Yeah, and I think it's probably a much longer debate because
well, let's have it one day.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you probably gathered I'm not disagreeing with you, but at the same time I'm not agreeing as such. Because I will come from the point of view is that we hear all this, and I'm going to call it nonsense of banning techniques. So you can see I'm down your pathway, even though I'm having a slightly different go at you. That I just get frustrated, as I'm sure we all do. This technique's banned, that technique's banned. We can't ban a technique. There is nowhere where you can ban a technique, can you?
Especially if you post a person on their own in a situation.
Well, even more, absolutely.
Chance of conflict.
Absolutely, even more so. And without. And it is a link, but I won't go off at a tangent with it. But we're taking away people's basic rights, and the fact they're already on their own already throws up the issues, doesn't it? Yeah. So, but that could fit into them. We're going back to my heading of advanced training around the needs analysis, which brings us right back to your introduction, a risk assessment around that needs analysis. Which again throws up the arguments from there. But this does it meet industry standards? Yeah. Crimes. If I had £1 for every time somebody said that to me, I'd be rich, but I'd be stressed because it frustrates me.
Yeah, I think the half the problem is there's an inexhaustible supply of young people who are prepared to stand on the door on their own, and a lot of them really have got no idea. I mean, I see them in retail security, and they want to stop the thieves and catch the thieves and do it, and they don't realise that that's not the game at all. The game is just to provide reassurance to a few folk, by a uniform presence, and the actual shop owners don't want the fuss and furor of seeing anybody wrestled down onto the ground for stealing, and they get the wrong impression. I think maybe supervisors should be getting a clearer understanding of what they're expected to do if they're on their own, and that should be by sort of standard operating procedures or protocols which say, you know, you don't do this, you don't do that, don't go within 10 feet of anyone else, you know. So if you're on your own, you just to report back and call 999. I mean, yeah, I called them, what happened, you know?
But Jim, and I'll pause after this and give other people that, but you know, let's not forget we were those young people once.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we were looking for Armageddon, but you know,
No.
and as with whether it's this industry or similar industries where they wear a uniform, it attracts certain types.
But would you send your son or daughter to do it?
No, absolutely not. But equally though, your son, my son, their sons, their daughters, nephews, nieces, we want them, don't we, in terms of the values, we want them to grow up, don't we, in a world with respect where they're not confronted with any of these issues.
Sure.
But when we think about universities, where we got a lot of people in universities take on security roles. So we got somebody, we would argue, my perception, they are totally blind and ignorant to this. Yeah. And then suddenly they got somebody who doesn't give a damn, who's going wild, and it's the worst experience I've ever encountered. By the way, I'm coming back. I don't disagree. It's just that, you know, this is the quandary with a lot of this, isn't it? You know,
I think
people, sorry, yeah, I'll stop.
I just want to think, because I mean we're very lucky, obviously, here, because you know Gary's experience of life, you know, when dinosaurs ruled the earth, you know, he's been on the doors since then. So you know, perhaps you can give us, you know, what was it like?
Can I just butt in just one note, just because in case I forget about it. But I read a report years ago by a guy called Dick Hobbs. He was looking at the nighttime economy and so on. And I remember him expressing the sort of violence prevention aspect was somebody who bore the scars of previous contests and who offered the threat of imminent violence.
Yes, I
that was the way that stopped and prevented other violence. And you just think, yeah, when they're that big and they're that ugly, but they're friendly, you just think, no.
And that's perfect thing now to bring Gary back in. Yeah.
What can I say to that? Thank you. I mean, if we're looking pre-SIA and pre-licensing, as I say, we're looking at the bounce away again. And the way it was dealt with, even if you were by yourself, you had to turn, you had to be able to switch just like that. It wasn't the case. It was all nice and smiles, but you wanted to calm stuff quickly. You had to turn quickly. And, you know, if you didn't, you were overridden. I remember working in places in Islington where they've got something like 4 or 5 door supervisors there. I was there by myself. I was running a big venue by myself. And the fact is, it was a case of you didn't take any BS from anybody. You could be polite, you could be nice, but as soon as it's going wrong, you had to deal with that situation rapidly. So there's no walking in, no trying to grab your arm, no trying to lead somebody out, no one trying to be nice. You literally had to bang. It had to be done there and then on the spot. And then you dealt with it. Everyone stood back. Everyone was in shock at all. Oh, bloody hell, I'm not going to mess with him. You drag the person out, you plonk them outside, and you kick them out the bum and go home. And they went home. And the trouble is, you know, let's use your word, industry standards. You know, they're so low now. We've got to do this control and restraint bits and pieces and what have you. It just does not work in reality when you're by yourself. You can't be that one person anymore, because you can lose your license. That's your livelihood. You know, bang. Yes, I've taken you away. No two ways about it. The police don't support you, and you've got nothing to fall back on.
I think that's
it comes back to Trevel said, to justifying their actions. Why did you do that? You know,
well,
they
Jim,
struggle. They do struggle to justify.
They do, Jim. But the thing, this is, I remember speaking to people at the SIA prior to the introduction of PI within the security industry, and well, I'm not going to mess around. It's Tony Holyland from the SIA who had to go, and you know, we had a couple of discussions because, you know, poor bloke had to go there to a couple of coroner's inquests, and then he is being put on the spot. He has been told, he is being asked, if we know this is going to happen, why are you not training people how to do it properly? Hence, this whole the whole thing came to fruition, you know, on about Go 3 or Go 4, and because I remember then when I was also with the ICM, you know, my capacity as Director of Communications, with young Trevel, a fellow director of the ICM, I might add, thing. We went on and led that, didn't we, Trevel, from that point on to help put it in, and we did our best in the manner that you hoped, Jim, when you first talked about waiver. But there's too many talking heads. Nobody wants to work together.
I always understood that the driver for the PI program was I think it was 13 deaths in 10 years, and it wasn't so much to get them trained up to do something. It was because people who were accused of using too much force would be able to say, "Well, I didn't know any other way. I haven't been shown any other way." So now they've been shown other ways, which you probably find out completely ineffective, you know, if anyone's resistive in any way.
That's far worse.
That's only the first level of training. And the bottom line is all these guys are signing off to say, it's safe here, I turn up for work every day, I'd never report that it's unsafe to work here. And there is just an acceptance by everybody that it is unsafe, and it's wrong. I think that the SIA should step in and say, you know, we recognise that, you know, one person doors is just not safe, and they should stop it. The same in retail as well. If your risk assessment has identified a need for security, then you should never post just one. It should be two.
Especially when you're selling, you know, as many supermarkets these days are selling alcoholic beverages. You know, they're licensed premises. Index, as far as I'm concerned, they're now open 24/7. You know, in fact, they have a greater degree of latitude opening hours wise than any licensed premises does, and they're not contributing anything to the regulatory regime and costs, which is impacting considerably on the wider nighttime economy, impacting profits, and therefore we wind up with that pressure on venues to employ the cheapest possible person going. It's a vicious cycle. Guys, I want to sort of just sort of tie that a little bit up. So, Jim, have you got any final remarks on that, on that side of the PI, etc., risk assessment?
Well, I just think that, you know, it should be a part of any risk assessment to do with the door supervisor role. Should say what are they going to be doing, and then how are they going to do that? How are they going to carry out that role? Not, oh, they're just there to do it. They should say, well, how are you going to do it? And I think that the risk assessment should take in not just the local, your knowledge of the local area and the demography of the clientele you may be visiting, but what's the research and the guidance showing us out there and so on. So when you start to look at it, you start thinking, wow, yeah, this is because half the injuries aren't reported. There's a significant underreporting across the whole thing for various reasons. I mean, no one wants to attract the attention of the licensing authorities or the police or whatever. And so it goes up. And I mean, I think there's lots of times where door supervisors have been injured and really are eligible for compensation under the Criminal Injuries Compensation Award Scheme, but don't claim it because they either don't know or they don't want to cause a fuss. They don't want to. And it'd be interesting to see how many door supervisors have been compensated given the number of assaults we know that are taking place. The Freedom of Information request. But thank you for your opportunity to speak. Appreciate it.
Oh, that makes me feel bad. Sorry, have I been taking everything again? Apologies, Jim. So go on then, Gary, you can have a go.
Was that? Sorry, have a go. I mean, I agree with Jim. I mean, what we really need to know is how many DS guest safety officers have been injured over the last few years and how many have been killed in action, because it doesn't happen. It doesn't goes out. And DSI are great for talk about how we do public safety. What about us? Who's looking after us? Because the SIA, as a regulatory body, they're not looking after the license holders, and we pay them money every year. So, one man doors are just not viable. They're not viable to the vendor operator, but they're not viable to the single user or the security officer on the ground. It's just not safe. No matter how it comes. And I've highlighted this up over years and years, and it's still going on. And how many more people have got to be injured, and how many more people have got to die, with an SIA badge before people start saying, "Hey, this needs to be changed."
Good point, mate. It is, as you say, there's no one looking. No one's looking.
No, they're not looking. And the thing about it is, the police aren't interested. Again, I've got to go fall back on my experience to recently. They still haven't arrested the guy who put me in hospital. And all I get from the police, they've had the video, CCTV, they've had the body-worn camera footage, they've got photographs, give all the evidence, and they still haven't bothered. And I'm still suffering from it. I'm not 100% clear yet. But the fact is, no one gives a damn about the security officer, the guest safety officer, the DS, whatever you want to call us. They don't. We're a statistic, and they just think we're there as cannon fodder. We're there, it doesn't matter.
Trevel?
Yeah, I think just expanding on the points that both Gary and Jim have made there, and right back to what you said at the start there, who's the training for? Well, the people who are coming onto the programs, the end users, if I can use that generic term. Then really, isn't it? We, even now, we want to encourage them, empower them, so that when people are on these one-person doors, I'm not being negative, I'm just being a realist. It's going to continue, sadly, themselves. But if they've got enough concerns about the fact that they're on the door on their own, then they feel empowered enough to speak up and raise their concerns. What I mean by that, as we know through our own experience, having that overt conversation, well, they can potentially capture that somewhere, can't they? And I'm not being underhanded, saying they're going behind people's backs, but we've all been there. We've raised concerns. We've still had to get on and do the job. But the fact is that we've raised and logged those concerns. It doesn't negate us from things if they go wrong. But the point is, we've had that, it's a bottom-up approach, isn't it? I appreciate leadership's supposed to be.
I don't like to call it that.
Say again?
I don't like to call it that.
What's that? Sorry.
Bottom-up approach.
All right. Okay. All right. Okay. Point taken. But anyway, hierarchy then. Sorry, Jim. But at least it's supposed to be transformational, but there's still a hierarchy, isn't there? Not when we report to somebody in themselves. Yeah. But I think there's also a link to all of this as well, isn't there? And that is the fact that in the vast majority, if not all organizations, the issue of training, whether it be initial training, recertification, refresher training, or bespoke training, the biggest problem for us all is, the enemy, is abstraction time. The enemy's abstraction time. So when we go right back to the fact that we're talking about, statement writings in the programs, I get that, it's written there. But Jim, you quite rightly touched on the issue of it's subjective. So when we're getting people to write reports, who's challenging their thoughts and ideas? I know we're all speaking the same language, but the point is we come back to who's challenging that. They're taking something away, which is almost like an objective reference, isn't it? Because it's not question of challenge. Allegedly, we're all leaving there with the same points of view. And that throws up that quandary, But I think training is a link to this as well. I really do believe strongly. Abstracting, there's not enough time. Never, we would argue that, and people would say we're biased, but there's not enough time, is there, for training? Not enough.
On top of that, there's the expense, isn't it? Because with door supervisors, I mean, I can remember I was speaking to somebody at British Institute of Innkeeping a long time ago, and they were keen to get the guys trained and all the rest of it. And we were saying, well, this is going to be the cost of it. And they were saying, well, the guys have to pay for the training themselves. And I was saying, well, that's not right. The employer should be training, and you should be being paid during your training. And she said, well, it's just not like that. And a lot of the guys, they do, part-time work and so on. So it is just loading and loading and loading the expense. And I'm conscious of even the SIA saying they've knocked £3 off the license. And you just think, oh my God, I mean, that's ridiculous, isn't it? As if that's really going to make any, but I did see a program, I think it was about 18 months ago now, from an American guy, and he appeared on LinkedIn, and he said, all occupational training should be free.
Wow.
Paid for by the government. And he said, if your training program's worthwhile, you should go to the government who accredit it, and they say, okay, where you go. And it should be. And I was just thinking, yeah, but I've still got to try and sell my training, but it should be free. If it was free, at the point.
The interesting point there, because you'll probably remember you used to be able to get government funded training until the SIA came in. As soon as it became a mandated legal thing, then it was required for the candidate to pay for it. So you couldn't get funding. So the only people then who have been able to get funding are, our community groups, DWP, etc., etc.
Well, we're holding the Olympics.
Yeah. I mean, that was those of us that did that. And I trained God knows how many people for the Olympics, and then most of it was actually done on the ground by the military, which was always the right thing to do anyway, as far as I was concerned. But moving swiftly on, I just want to touch. So just to sort of summarize that point, we've picked up on one-man doors aren't safe. Let's get it right at the top. I'm going to put it at the bottom as well. One-man doors aren't safe. They're not safe due to the number of issues or number of responsibilities that they're expected to carry out as part of their normal duties, and that's without having some kind of backup with them in the first place. There isn't enough research going into the levels of violence and abuse that's being experienced by guest safety officers and those people working in that environment at all. The training that's there is academic, is taken from an academic perspective rather than a practical perspective. So we have issues then from what I've gathered, in terms of practical skills that are necessary, such as report writing, carrying a notebook, these follow-up important things. And I would say, I'm going to go on first aid, but we'll come into that on the next session, because I'm well aware of the time and I don't want to spend a massive time on this now. So that's basically where I'm at. I hope I've summed that bit up correctly. Because let's bear in mind our expert witnesses, they're here. If they haven't got the stuff to work with, they can't help anybody. And that does bring me in to the next question, or sort of thing. When we're talking about training people and giving people the knowledge they need to then work within an environment, and I think Trevel and you, Jim, you both touched on the legality. They don't know what the law is. They've come out and are facing something they've never seen before, and somebody's given them like the 1 hour section of the SIA thing where we've covered what law is, and about four different things like, was it theft, murder, etc., etc. It may have changed since I last trained. So where are we in terms of that? Is this helpful?
Yeah, I was going to what specific. Sorry, forgive me, because that was a bit raw. Apologies.
Yeah, you pick out the bit that appeals to you. I'm sure Jim will get the rest. We'll give someone else something to talk about.
Okay, so then, all right. So pick up a bit. So training methodologies, themselves. as we know, there are still lots of training organizations which break things down into 1 million component parts themselves, which fundamentally just takes people backwards, doesn't it? And certainly in our industry, if we think about sports, isn't it? If we were taking somebody for a sport to assess their sports prowess, we'd put them through the paces first, wouldn't we? Yeah. Then we've got a measure of their performance levels, and then we can develop upon that. Okay, we appreciate why there's some factors why we can't always do that themselves, but ultimately, we want to introduce, don't we, a set of concepts, set of principles, set of methodologies, by and large, because when somebody has to use force, and I'll put it out there, even though we're aware of it, the reality is, apart from those few people we alluded to before, nobody really wants to get involved in hands-on, unless I've got it wrong. Apologies, but unless I've got it wrong, nobody really wants to do that. So, as all four of us have said or intimated, when the moment arises, we want to manage the situation, don't we? Whatever that means in context. Yeah. And that empowerment, really, if we've been given a set of training standards and methods which are quite constrained, industry standards, then, when that industry standard either A, doesn't work, or the individual feels it won't work, then the further compounded in terms of not doing what they should do to manage the situation. So, yeah, I think we need a set of concepts, methodologies, and principles around a significant framework involving the law, which then empowers people to do the right thing in the moment.
Jim?
Well, I think that people should tend to get training programs tend to be developed by ex-police. Ex-police know criminal law, but they don't know about common law, which is the point I made earlier. And common law is far better than common law allows for right-minded action to take place, and instead of scaring everybody away from ever using physical force, everyone got plenty of right to do it, and you can use up to and including lethal force as long as you can justify that it was reasonably necessary in the circumstances and proportionate to the harm you were trying to prevent. I think that they should know about breach of the peace. They don't get told about that. The citizen's duty to protect and preserve the King's peace is now, I suppose. And it's a wonderful piece of legislation because it gives you the power to use physical force in any situation where violence is a factor beforehand. I remember an example given to me at training school is that if there was a Highland bagpiper causing a nuisance by playing the bagpipes in Oxford Street, and several passers-by were making complaints and getting anxious, you could actually arrest the bagpiper to prevent a breach of the peace, even though he hadn't done anything wrong. And I just thought, well, that's all you need. That is all this Section 3 of the Criminal Law Act and all the rest of it. No. But I do think that the recent videos or little short videos that the SIA have been putting out on reducing restraint and so on, they're just as effective, and it should be broad-based terms, and the training should not be, in my opinion, should not be techniques, because techniques take a long time to master and they don't get the training time, and when your heartbeat goes above 120, you haven't got fine manipulation skills, and have to be gross motor if anything. And so just basic guidance would be better than anything else. But I do think they should get better information about the risks of immobilizing somebody, restraining them, so holding them on the floor and so on and so forth. And I think that's where the biggest risks are, that and pushing, the big shove, the doorman shove, and I see just recurring features of guys who've been pushed over and then hit their head and died or have been seriously injured through that. Okay, I just wondered if there was one other thing. You were saying when you're working, on your own in a situation, we were always taught in the police that if we were in a crowd situation, our job was to make friends with as many people in the crowd as we possibly could, so that we had allies in the event that something was going to happen. I know that regular door supervisors have normally got really good relationships with the other punters in the pub or whatever. They can often rely on backup, if not preemptive force on their behalf from a lot of them. But I don't know. I don't think that a lot of door supervisors are aware that that's what they should be doing. You know, there's no, where would the training come for that? Doesn't say anything about it in the SIA training that I've seen.
Gary?
Sorry, Gary, just before you go, apologies, because somebody just said that, and it goes right back to a point you made, but the point you made, Jim, is very valid, but isn't all this about customer service support? Sorry, I couldn't let that pass. But no, the point you're making is about that, isn't it? Engaging with people. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
But for an ulterior reason.
Well, the thing about it is I've always said, you know, let's look at that film, the old Roadhouse film. Be nice till you can't be nice anymore. But I always listen, hearts and minds. It's how you deal with people when you meet and greet. You know, and one of the old things I used to, back when we used to check IDs and bits and pieces, I used to call people by their first name. I used to read their driver license things, and it's like if it was you, Jim, I go, "Hello, Jim, how you doing?"
Yeah.
And I'd introduce myself. That breaks down so many barriers straight away because you've made it personal. I now know your name. You know my name. Introduce myself. How, Jim? How you doing? I'm Gary. Are you okay? Nice to see you here tonight. That breaks down so many barriers as you walk through that main door, whoever it may be. It's hearts and minds. You're building up that thing. We're here to help you. And if you need anything, give us a shout. And that is such an important role. And it does work. And it's worked for years and years and years. But as you say, the training now, they don't incorporate that. It is just, you know, content dumping, which we've used the word many times before. It's content dump. They're churning out sausages. And we get sausages out of the ground. People who don't understand culture, don't understand English culture. And then you've got these people who don't understand other cultures. And again, they're just turning up and doing the job. It's not going to work. And this is why it's falling apart now. You know, those days of the old bouncer who did control things were great because they did. It was reduced it and things worked. But now, all just turning out sausages. No disrespect for the people. Some of them would be good people coming through. But, you know, I saw an advert the other day for a big training organisation. And they were, and it worded something like this: if you think the door supervisor course is too hard, why don't you come and train with us? You'll see how easy it is. You know, and that is a big organisation.
It's an easy job. Easy job, Gary.
It's not an easy job.
Can do it.
Yeah, but as someone said to me, in Spain, it takes 6 months to become a security officer. 6 months. In England, 5 days, and you get a license to practice.
Wow.
That's what I used, license to practice security. Well, I've been practicing security now for 37 years, and by the SIA, ideology.
Yeah, but it's what do you call it? I will bring it because we're going to. I'm conscious of the time again. You know, interesting people, so annoying. You know, you wind up having to have interesting conversations. So I just wanted to finish off. Really, is to ask you all about a training. So we've all been trainers. We've all gone out there and sold our wares. Yeah, some of us still are, etc., etc. It's compliance training. And one of the things that struck me, and I mentioned this earlier in the preamble, when we were in the green room, is that what is the point of it?
Yeah.
What is when we are trying to how do we explain to people that we are not trying to take money off them because we want to be millionaires and you know, etc., etc. We are doing what we do because it is a legal requirement, and that in taking on board and using the fact that they do have to do this training, they are actually investing in themselves. They're not investing in me or you or whatever. They're investing in themselves and their own safety. Do we sell that message? Or am I, you know, oh, it's compliance, you have to do it, mate. Because that's how it says, you got to do it.
Yeah, well,
rather than I want to do it.
Well, it hasn't got a good enough reputation to sell itself, has it?
Well,
there's so many people. You look on YouTube, it's just, you know.
But how do we change that narrative, Jim?
Well,
or can we?
Free.
Free.
make it free, make all occupational training free would be one of the ways out. But I mean, the thing is, you know how it is. You may have your week on the SIA course, and then your first day on the door on a Friday night, and the bloke says, your partner says to you, "This is how it's done, mate." It's a load of shit what they've been told, and that's got to change, really. But how do you do it? I don't know. I'm not the best salesperson, too direct. Yeah.
I think the uphill struggle we have with trying to get the people on the ground to train is they've got the line which has been said to me, "I don't need to train anymore. I'm SIA trained."
Yeah.
And that's the line. I'm SIA trained. It's the be all and end all of training. No, it's not.
You will know, Gary, how significant it is to be able to converse on the personal radio when the shit's hit the fan. And do they have radio training? No.
Well, they do now.
Well,
Yeah, they do, but it's a giggle.
It's scripted again. It's a scripted thing, and they stand there and they go, "Yes, I've just seen a vehicle registration number Alpha Foxtrot figures 10," and it's scripted. Once they leave that environment, they've forgotten how to turn a bloody radio on, even let alone how to charge the damn thing. You know, I hear it every week. We got people who rock up, and this is what I get on the radio. You decide for that.
You got it.
But it's interesting, Jim, you know, and you're right there, because, you know, the consistent challenge, and even after we've gone, the challenge will still be there. What I mean by that, you know, that we used to call them barrack room lawyers. Forget what you've been taught in training, sit down with me, I'm going to tell you how it's done. You know, that hence the barrack room lawyer, or whatever other term people use. But I think, you know, the drip effect is, and I'm going to introduce into this just by way of a heading, if we think about, isn't it, equality, diversity, and inclusion. You know, we want to empower people, don't we? When we look outside the window, at the end of the day, 12 ordinary people in the street are likely to be the next people on the course. Yeah. And, you know, I'll go back to our sons, daughters, nephews, nieces. They're not from the same backgrounds as us. And that's a good thing, certainly from my family perspective anyway. Not that I've done anything wrong, but if you get what I'm trying to say, they're going to be the next people who get a license. Yeah. They're going to be the next people who have a license. When they come on that course, you know, we don't say this, but it's learning, development, court defensibility. The silent C, that's the compliance, isn't it? Because the moment we say compliance, not be funny, even I'm switching off. I'm losing the will to live, you know. But the learning development, and as we know, the learning, we want to empower them. That was your point, and I'll keep coming back to it. No apologies being a broken record. Subjective, like we four have got perspectives about everything we're saying, and until the other three people change our minds and opinions, we're going to hold those beliefs, aren't we, all day long? Yeah, that factor comes into it. But the development, as we all know, and you're absolutely right, the real development comes, isn't it, when they face a challenging situation and they've been through it. That's when the learning really takes place, doesn't it? And, you know, for some, hopefully, with respect, it doesn't happen, if you get my drift, really, because it means they've been doing everything right. I know it's much more wide than that, but if you get what I'm trying to say. But, you know, that bit about the learning development and, you know, and the silency, court defensibility, you know, at the start of those programs, a lot of people still push to compliance, don't they? You know, and they're losing the audience before they've even started. But if they can, you know, do it in such a way that they're empowering people, you know, and whatever language we use, and many others, by the way, there's lots of good people out there, but we want people to professionally challenge us, isn't it? You know, we're working for a program. At the end of the day, it's a generic program. We, like they'll have our perspective on things, you know, because it's subjective. Who's right, you or me? Go on, Ian, you got a face on you there.
No, mate, because and I don't have to say anything because you know who's right. But that's
okay.
But that's by the by.
But it is that balance, though, isn't it? We've got, you know, it's a drip effect, and you're right. It takes longer. It's Groundhog Day. No matter how far we think we're moving forward, things happen that make us think we're not going as far forward as we'd like. You know, and those analogies come out.
But that's the thing. But the thing that I'm trying to capture in, and I'm sorry if I've not quite got this. It's about, we all know this, and you know the answers that you've given. But the question is when I look at it, is how do we change the narrative? How do we change it so that we make sure that the people who come on the courses, whether it's, you know, to do an SIA course, whether it's to do a first aid course, whether it's to do whatever course it is, PI course, is when they come on to that, yes, it is part of a compliance, a mandated legal requirement, but it is also something that is in their best interest, something that automatically prompts them to take an extra level, not switch off, as you said, Trevel, but to turn around and say, yeah, I'm not going to get this time back in my life, but it's going to be, and the bit that I did like that you said, Trevel, was about court defensibility. You gave 3 things, but the last one was and court defensibility, because nobody turns around and says, and when you go on this course, we're going to do objectives, we're going to do the content, and this is going to give, what is the outcome? It's court defensibility. There is a real outcome that benefits you. So maybe that's something that can be looked at, you know, as working another discussion.
But then that's an area, isn't it, which, and I think we, the trainers, the royal we, need to overtly present that more and let people know, won't they, that the training, the programs, you know, legally, medical, defensible, and then if somebody has an incident, whether it's a complaint or more against them, or they're going down a tribunal or a court process, then we'll be on hand to support them. Yeah, that message definitely needs to be sent out clearer. You know, the message, you know, for me, that, you know, we certainly send out, and I'm sure many other people send out. But the point is, you know, and I said before, you know, we know people, you know, we referenced it. People are in court, but they've got no support, have they, from the training providers, from management, from, you know, the premises super, etc. themselves. So that area around court defensibility, yeah, people, the message needs to be clearly driven home that, yeah, they follow the methodologies as per the program, will support them in court or whatever process post-incident. It's more than just court.
Okay, guys, you know, it's that, you know, it's been, as I say, it's just been, it's always wonderful. And I do hope that we can come back and explore this perhaps in even more detail, if that's possible. No, it is. I know it is. There's lots of things, especially something that you raised earlier on, which has slipped my mind, Jim. But
a national standard of training.
Sorry?
A national standard of training.
Well, no, well, mate, I totally agree with that anyway. This is something I've been going on about for ages. And I think we discussed anyway. So I'm with you all the way. But so if we just go around, Gary, final thoughts?
Well, just sum it all up. At the end of the day, it's, you know, we've agreed, you know, that one-man doors aren't safe. Training is still not fit for purpose. Interesting fact from Jim, well, I'd like to go a bit more detail about, is the common law thing, which I'll catch up with. That's an interesting thing. Trevel, as always, great knowledge coming in there and giving some great background work.
Thank you.
Trevel?
Yeah, I'll echo Jim's point, please, around the law, certainly common law. You know, because as we know, when push comes to shove, the measurement, you know, Jim introduced it, we've expanded on it, but the measurement will come, won't it, about the application of force. Yeah, and I think common law needs to be pushed a lot more.
To me, it starts with you. Everyone tells you about your duty of care to other people, and no one ever tells you about your duty of care to yourself.
100%.
The duty of care to yourself and your duty of care to other people is actually replicated at Section 7 of the Health and Safety at Work Act, where it says, you know, employees have a duty to take reasonable care for their own health and safety and for the health and safety of others who may be affected by their action, including inaction. Now, if you go down to your duty of care to yourself, it's paramount. No one can ever expect you to sacrifice your safety to, you start telling door supervisors that, and then you say, yeah, and if you do take a risk, then you're knowingly taking a reckless risk, and the insurance companies will be able to regard your actions as contributory negligence, which means you get niched. And that's where it starts. But is anyone going to tell a security officer that if there's any, you know, safety aspect to a confrontation, they should withdraw? Otherwise, they could risk, you know,
unemployment.
But that's what it is. I mean,
rapid unemployment.
And your duty of care to others is your authority to use reasonable force to effect anything that needs to be done in the interests of other people's safety as well as your own. So that's all it is, you know. Was it? Somebody put it quite well. They said that the Act of Parliament can never ask a person to do more than the common law already asks them to do. Which is quite a way. It's just that they're probably a little bit more explicit, but the general theme of the common law is that. So if you had common law trespass, common law breach of the peace, and common law duty of care, and then you've got this doctrine of necessity thing where, you know, it's a principle of English law that it would be okay to breach someone else's rights if your reason for doing so was to prevent a greater wrong happening. So you got that's pretty much all the common law that you need to know. That's all I've needed to know anyway.
Oh, that's good news. Gents, you know, it has been wonderful. It has. It's been great. So just it's time to say goodbye. Again, big smiles like we've enjoyed ourselves. And I'll sign us off. Thank you very much, guys. Peace out.
Good to meet everybody again. Take care.
Cheers. Nice to meet you, Gary.